Okay, so we are recording. Okay.
Okay.
Just gotta let in people.
Thank you, Derek.
All right.
So
Okay.
just to introduce ourselves,
Okay.
I'm Priscilla Stadler from the LaGuardia Center for Teaching and Learning.
I am Derek Stadler. Do we just want to do a little bit of a disclaimer that we are the unrelated Stadlers. We are not related. Maybe 300 years ago we might have been, but we are currently not. We just want to make sure, because I think some people might think that we are, but we are not.
Just friendly colleagues. So yeah, we are going to jump right in. Derek, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Today, we're going to cover a few universal design concepts, some cross-platform tips and best practices that you can use in various platforms. We'll take a look at how they play out in Google Docs, but they also apply to other platforms if you don't use Google Docs. And then we'll take a look at some PowerPoint accessibility and Microsoft Office 365, excuse me, accessibility issues. We hope to give you a few minutes of hands-on time and share some other tips and resources with you. So, Derek.
Okay, so Universal Design, or UD, attempts to remove physical and virtual barriers to learning. It acknowledges student variability and considers that there is no such thing as the average learner. It considers that barriers to learning are often not the fault of the student. What barriers to learning might students be facing in the courses that you teach? Some of these things can be a print handout that a person who is blind or a person with low vision cannot see. It can be a syllabus or assignment prompt that is not easily accessible using a screen reader. It can also be students having difficulty with writing assignments or understanding instruction. How might you remove some of these barriers? Well, one way is offering your students options to help them succeed. It could be assignments or the final project as a paper or as a video project or as a podcast. It can be ensuring that any handouts are available in both print and electronic form. UD is also best to communicate your expectations and instructions clearly to students. I have seen that sometimes student failure to understand instructions are because of how they are written. UD also is proactive, designing in advance rather than reactive. So for example, a deaf student walks into your class and you realize that you're about to show a video that has inaccurate captions, like the captions on YouTube. Using UD would mean vetting your course materials in advance to ensure accessibility. And lastly, UD is also lets your students know that you are available and approachable. This can be using language that is supportive of developing a student instructor relationship.
Okay, so some of the accessibility practices that we want to share with you are focused on users who are using a screen reader. They might be using a screen reader because they have low vision or because they're blind. Some people who don't have vision issues also learn better when the content is read aloud to them. And because we are designing for these learners, we wanted to give you a sense of what a screen reader is and does, and a little bit about what it sounds like. So we're going to play a few segments from a screen reader demo that goes through several different practices related to the document structure, providing alternative text, In other words, it's a description of an image, how to do links, best practices for links. And then later in the session, when Derek shows PowerPoint, he'll be discussing color and font style. But these are all practices that you should be aware of and thinking about no matter what you're designing for your students. So Derek, can you cue up the screen reader demo? And before you start it, I just want to explain the first demo we're going to see has to do with what are called headings. And these, you know, if I wanted to make something a heading, I could make the font larger, I could make it bold, and anyone who could see that, anyone who's sighted would realize from the visual cues that this is a heading. However, if you cannot see that, you wouldn't know it, and a screen reader wouldn't know it. So it's important to actually make it official, whether using Google Docs or Word or any kind of word processing tool, and label it as a header. We'll show you how to do that in Google Docs in a little while. That way the user knows that this is actually a heading. Okay, Derek.
Okay.
Top 5. Fran Tarkenton. Heading level 1 top 5. Heading level 2 Fran Tarkenton.
Okay, thanks. So heading level 1 refers in the hierarchy and the structure of the document to the overall heading. And then heading level 2 would be subsection. So you could have multiple heading 2. Okay, now we're going to take a look at conveying imagery with what's called alt text. In this demo, they actually include in the alternative text, because imagine that let's say you're blind and there's an image in the document. You can't see it. Alt text provides a brief description of what that image is. So it's a really important practice to be able to provide that for learners. In this demo, they include the size of the image, which is not something that's an older practice that you don't need to do anymore. But let's hear the difference between having alt text, between first not having alt text and then having alt text.
Dash picture 1 2.59 inches wide by 0.82 inches high dash 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 underline 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 dash dash dash. Description: image of Fran Tarkenton 2.59 inches wide by 0.82 inches high heading level 2.
So at least the person listening on the screen reader knows that that's a picture of Fran Tarkenton. Okay. Now we're going to look at an issue where someone just wanted to make space in a document and they just kept hitting the return key instead of making a page break. So let's look at that one, Derek.
Blank, 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 page 3. Page 3.
So yeah, you can imagine how annoying it would be to have blank read out loud to you 10 times unnecessarily. So part of that is, you know, part of what we're doing with this type of designing, accessible design, is to cut down on the annoyance factor for our learners and our readers. And then finally, we'll take a look at the difference between annoying links and accessible links.
Less link http://bleacherport.com/articles/330,695-the-top-10-minnesota-vikings-quarterbacks-of-all-time/page/11. less link source of Fran Tarkenton article greater.
Okay, thank you, Derek. So that's the difference between having your URL out there visible and the screen reader then will just read all those letters and numbers to someone. So the best practice, more accessible practice would be to put the long URL behind a descriptive, or sometimes called a semantic link. Now we're going to look a little bit closer at these same practices and how they play out in a Google Doc. So I'm going to share my screen. In just a moment, I just have to get my positioning set up here. And we will make this PowerPoint available for you after the session. So, and also feel free, since we are trying to get through a lot today, and we know this is a lot, feel free to contact us if you have questions later. Okay, can everybody see my Google Doc? Great. Okay, so this is the bad Google Doc. I actually made it worse than it was. One of the first things is that it doesn't have a title, and you definitely want your Google Doc to have a title. So if it doesn't automatically give it a title, or even if it does, I'm just going to paste the actual title in here. So it will make it easier for my students to find. What Google, I'm going to say I have a like-hate relationship with Google these days, because Google does try to help accessibility with this outline feature, which you may have noticed if you use Google Docs, and it's also available in Word. And it is really helpful, especially if you have a long document, because remember I was talking before about headings and structure. Google will try to make what it thinks are headings, even if you haven't labeled them as such, automatically appear over here. So it's easier for the user to navigate. But because I don't have anything labeled as a heading, nothing is appearing here. Even if it does appear, you want to make sure that it's actually styled as either a heading. So I'm applying heading 1 now, and you can see that it's appeared. Now you should only have one heading 1 in any document. That's like the main heading of that document. Here we start getting into lower level headings. So this, I can tell it's a heading, but if a screen reader was reading this, it would not be able to tell it was a heading. So it wouldn't know, oh, I'm onto a new section here, a new topic, a new theme. So what I want to do is the next level in the structure of the document is heading 2. So I'm going to apply heading 2, and you can see that it came up and it's indented under the heading 1. So what I'm doing basically, and now I have another heading 2. It's the same level as this one. I can have multiple, I can have as many heading 2s, heading 3s, heading anything under heading level 1 as I want to. Okay, so this is a heading. I can tell it's a subheading by looking at it. It's not bolded. So I know that this is a heading 3, but you can imagine a screen reader would not know that unless I label it. So I'm gonna do that. We'll see if these spaces cooperate with me. This is also a heading 3. And you can style these if you want. We won't go into that right now. Oh, sometimes the spacing gets a little wonky and you might have to play with it. But I don't want to take time with that right now. So I'm just going to put heading level 3s on these. And you see every time I do this, it appears in the index in a logical way. And it's nice because these are links. And so I could jump back up to the top just by clicking on my heading 1. Okay. So alt text. So here's an image, but it's also got text on the image. So if I don't do alt text for this image, a screen reader will know that there's an image there, but it won't know what the image is of, and it certainly will not know what it says. Google Docs actually makes this really easy. You just right click and then it gives you alt text, gives you the alt text. I'm going to call this the banner. And I'm just going to say I'm for students and text reading. I'm doing kind of an abbreviated beyond the margins. If I was doing the, I'm such a terrible typist. If I was doing this in a more good practice way, I would be actually like, look, putting everything that's appears as text that's on the image into this description so that someone who is using a screen reader would be able to know what it says. But even if there's no text on it, you should still describe the image. And I'm going to actually go down to the bottom because I have another image here. And this image is a graph. So this is obviously key to this document. But a screen reader user, if they're just using their screen reader, they're going to hear image unless you put alt text in here. So this is where you have to take some time actually and think about what information you're conveying by using this graphic, and charts and graphs will take longer. And then, describe what it is. It's the disability status of undergraduate students by age and institution, type 2012, and then you would give them the numbers. You would describe what this chart actually shows. So I'm not going to do that because that takes more time than we have right now. But when we get to the hands-on, you might want to try that because you're going to get to this chart definitely deserves a much better description than I'm giving it right now, but I just wanted to show you where this is so you will know how to use it. And you should do this in any program that you're using. This is cross-platform. So you would do it in Word, you would do it in PowerPoint, you would do it anytime you use an image. Okay, so one more quick thing I want to show you. Remember that terrible link thing in the screen reader demo? So imagine, I mean, this is not that bad. Some of them, have like long strings of numbers, but even so, you don't need to have this hanging out here like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a place. Where should I put this link that will be going with the flow of the document? So I'm going to cut it from here, and I'm actually just going to put it behind the title of the doc because that's what it's linking to. So this link is fine. It's going to take me to that article about 1 in 4 adults in the United States are reported having a disability. Here's another practice to be aware of with links. Sometimes screen reader users will navigate a document by the links. They might be looking for information that is linked to in a particular document as a way of navigating. So if they are hearing click here, click here, click here for the links, they don't know where that link is going to take them. And it's also very confusing if multiple links are using the same phrase. So if you learn one thing today, I am going to ask that it be, please don't use click here for your links. Please look for what is the link. Okay, in this case, I can see that it wants to take me to higher education disability, past and future of, I think, undergraduate students. So this can be I could put this behind research indicates. And so what I would have to do is I can copy the link URL. I'm actually going to remove this sentence because I'm going to embed this link in a more logical and descriptive place. So I'll just click, just delete that sentence. So it takes a little bit of thinking sometimes, but it's not too hard. And I think you'll find that it will be really helpful for users that use screen readers, but also just for the flow of the document. And I would suggest also doing this in email. So now my link back here. Okay. All right. And then I would do same here. I would look for where is a logical place that I can put the study into. Okay. So you can, now that you know about click here, when you get your chance to fix this very bad practice document in a little while, you'll have the opportunity to think of good places to put those links. Okay, and I think that for now I can wrap up. Are there any questions at this point before we move on to PowerPoint, which we're going to do PowerPoint and Office 365?
Pratik had a question. I'm not sure which it was. The how does the screen reader read this link? Were you referring to a previous link with that, or was it right here, Pratik?
Yeah, just the one that you hello everyone.
Hi,
Hi,
Pratik.
Pratik.
Hey Priscilla, hey Derek. I was just wondering about the one that you just modify, where it says like a research indicated. So how it's going to read it to the like a in a screen reader? Would it say like a research indicated that if the new, and it just read the sentence, or it will say there is a hyperlink that says higher education and disability? How does that read?
Yeah, it conveys, I'm not sure exactly, and it might depend because there are different types of screen readers. So it might depend on the actual screen reader, like how it would do it, but it would let the user know that that is a link, that text is linked.
Okay.
And I think it would also say that the title of the link that it links to.
Right. And let's just assume that if the student is blind, how he or she would be able to click that? Like, I don't know.
Oh, so yeah, they have there are different ways that blind people will navigate with keyboard. There are some touch different key formations. There are some that use Braille. So one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that blind users, just as deaf users or anyone with any type of ability, are not all a single unit. They might be accessing in different ways. So some will like Braille, others will like a different type of keyboard. And yeah, I don't know if anyone else in the group has more information specifically about blind users. If you do, please feel free to speak up at this point.
And we have a question from Emma. How long should the more in-depth description for the graph be? And is there any best practice limit?
That's a really great question, Emma, and thank you for asking it, because I've seen there are many different styles of alt text. I think at this point, some people like a long description. With the charts and graphs, I would give a summary of the information in as succinct a way as possible. It's not going to be really short because any graph actually contains usually quite a bit of information, and some contain a lot of information. So however long it has to be, to say it in as clear a way as possible, I would say is the best practice with charts and graphs. For other types of images, I've seen like very basic, very minimal stuff, but I've also seen like more poetic, like a group of 4 students, some looking to the left, some looking to the right, they're wearing this, some people go really into depth with their descriptions, and other people think that it should be kept really short. So it's kind of all over the map on that one. I think the most important thing is just be sure to think about how you can convey at least a sense of what's there, if it's an image, and what it might really relate to the context of your document. Like, for example, a picture of Rosa Parks sitting in the front of the bus when she was doing civil disobedience on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and there's a white man sitting behind her. So like that image has tremendous contextual meaning if you're teaching about civil rights. So you would want to, really make sure to describe it very clearly and in depth as much as possible. Something like this, the banner on top, yeah, it's nice, it's important, but it's not like making or breaking the meaning of the document. So I think those are the kinds of things to think about when you're writing your alt text.
And Clarence had a question: how common are these practices found in professional journal articles and research studies? I think I can answer this because I work in a library, but oftentimes I've seen in databases, these practices are not used, I think, to the fullest extent that they should be used, especially with hyperlinks, sometimes even alt text and or tables that are used. And these could be, journals that we, that we have access to through subscription databases, or it could be, journals that we promote that are OER. Some other issues I've seen is sometimes the use of all capital letters. So yes, to answer the question, unfortunately, it happens more often than it should.
I think there's a growing awareness of the importance of these practices, but we're all learning.
Yeah, and Ian mentioned in the chat that APA requires URLs and DOIs in citations, which are not accessible, when when it's read, which it's unfortunate, but maybe when there is a new version of APA, when they get there, they'll follow some of these practices.
Or they might be, I think also if they're in a section that's labeled as references or citations, that at least the screen reader or the person using the screen reader would know, like, only to go there if they really needed to for some reason. Okay, so unless there are any questions right now, I think we can hand it over to Derek.
Okay, let me get.
I will stop my share.
Okay, so we often share our PowerPoint presentations with colleagues and or students, and we need to make sure that they are accessible to all users, just like our Word documents or Google Docs. In addition to the tips and best practices that were previously mentioned, such as adding alt text, it is recommended that you use at least 20-point font size in a slide. You should also avoid transitions and animations, since they can be distracting and you make it difficult for screen reader users to access your presentation. You should use a simple background, with high contrast to the font and to other images in the foreground to ensure that your readers or viewers can easily understand your slides. You should avoid busy backgrounds and background graphics whenever possible. Also, do not overload your slides with information. Keep them as short and as concise as possible. If you have a lot of information to get across, break it up over several slides. Limit bullet points on each slide to a maximum of 6 is a good practice. And also include unique titles for each slide in your presentation. If you have 2 slides with the same name, you may want to rename them, the title, and then add like a 1 and a 2, or maybe A and B to that title in each of the slides. And lastly, include audio video content in alternative formats, such as closed captions for videos and transcripts for audio and video content. Now I'm going to show you a document using Office 365. I know some of you use this, some of you still use Google Docs. To log into Office 365, you need to use your CUNY First credentials, and from the Office 365 dashboard, you do have access to Microsoft Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Forms. Just going to unshare my screen to get to.
While you're doing that, I can mention something I forgot to say.
Sure.
About Google Docs, which is Google Docs, unlike Microsoft Office products, does not have a built-in accessibility checker. There are accessibility checkers, which Derek is going to show you, which are built into Microsoft tools, whether you're using the online Office 365 version or the desktop version. However, you can save your Google Doc as a Word doc and use the accessibility checker and see if it gives you errors. And that's very helpful. But I will also say it's more important for you to know what are the best practices and to pay attention to the structure, like the headings, using bulleted lists rather than asterisks. That's another thing that will help screen readers. Putting in your alt text, doing the links as we did, because an accessibility checker will not necessarily catch those things. So we have to be smarter and more accessible than the accessibility checkers are. Okay, Derek, thank you for letting me interrupt there.
Sure, no problem. So here is the Microsoft Office 365 dashboard. You can see Teams, you can see Word, you can see Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Forms here on the left. As part of Office 365, we have access to a dashboard in OneDrive, where we can look at all of our documents and folders. So the document that I prepared, and like Priscilla, I also kind of went to town on this and kind of made it really bad looking, but I'm sure we've seen similar PowerPoint slideshows in our experiences, where just to start off here, you can see that the contrast between the font color and the background is bad, because there is not enough contrast here, and it kind of blends in, I think, a little bit too much. And here we also have we have everything in capital letters on the bullet points, which may make something like this even harder to read. The font style here, while some might really like it, it is kind of ornate. We should always stick to something like an Arial font, Times Roman, to kind of make it a little bit more readable. And just a few notes here on the color. You see, in this particular slideshow, they use color to emphasize, which is not a good practice here, because of all of the different kinds of colors that we see. We see the red on the bottom, which would not be known for somebody using a screen reader, that this has to be emphasized. and how this is in red. We also see here the use of underlines, which is not a good way to emphasize, because typically underlines are used for hyperlinks. And you can see this particular, where it says FERPA here in the bullet point, that's a hyperlink, all right? Whereas in the lower part where it says students are required, that's an underline that is suggesting emphasis on that word, which may seem to some that that's also a hyperlink. There is also an underline under federal policy in the slide title. All right, looking at some of the other slides here, we see a lot of bullets, and we see small font size. We always want to keep it to at least 20, and if it spans over multiple slides, that's okay, except we need to make sure that we use unique titles. You can see between slide 2 and 3, they have the same slide title, so we might want to add a 1 next to the title in this particular slide, and then add a 2 in this particular slide. I'm just going to show you how one other bad part about this slideshow, when we start it, you're going to see it's using transitions, which it's not a good practice. It may look visually stimulating, but it is not a good practice to have these kinds of transitions in a slideshow. All right. And just like in the desktop versions of PowerPoint and Microsoft Word, we do have here under the review tab, we have check accessibility. So if I run that accessibility checker, it's going to give me the error here that this particular image here is missing alt text. All right. So I would have to add alt text to that slide. And also there is a tip here for duplicate slide title. All right. And as I mentioned, we do have more than one slide by the same title here. So it would be good practice to give that second one a different name. And in the third slide here, we also have that long URL. And we also have some underlining here, which is also a hyperlink to a, actually in the slide title here, there is a hyperlink and the use of a URL. All right. So these are some of the common things that we see in PowerPoint. People often forget the alt text and the slide title to give each slide a unique name. Okay. All right, so let me go back here. I guess we're ready for the hands-on activity. And we're going to give you the option of trying to fix either one of the documents that we showed you, either the bad Google Doc or the bad PowerPoint slideshow. And I'm going to put links to them into the chat.
And by the way, you'll all be working on the same documents, unless you're welcome to, make a copy and download your own copy of either the PowerPoint or the Google Doc. It's the same ones that we showed you. If you want to work individually, that's fine.
It may be easier to do the PowerPoint on the desktop version because it does have more features for the background than in Office 365.
Juan, were you raising your hand? Did I see you raise your hand?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay. Sorry.
Okay, I put the links to the 2 documents in there. So feel free to edit either one of them or download and kind of look at some of the things that we pointed out that you can fix.
And let's take about like a little less than 10 minutes to do this.
Okay.
We'll give you a heads up when we're coming to that time.
Anybody have any questions about anything so far?
Hugo, I just saw your note, Hugo. We're doing a hands-on practice. So you could work with either the Google Doc that I showed you or the PowerPoint that Derek used, the bad docs, and fool around with fixing them. You're welcome to either work on the one at the link or to download a copy yourself or make a copy yourself and work on that. And we actually have just a couple more minutes of hands-on, then we'll go into some Q&A and sharing tips and resources.
Got it.
Okay, let's take one more minute on the hands-on. If you're not finished, don't worry. You can keep working after the workshop, and we're also happy to answer any questions after the session if you have any. So one more minute. Okay, everyone, let's come back together. And at this point, now that you've had a chance to implement some of these practices, any questions?
Hi, I have a question about using color for emphasis. I know that can be really popular with faculty members, especially in like syllabi. And a lot of faculty members are really want to use color for emphasis because it can be eye-catching for some students. What is a good replacement for emphasizing something like that?
So what I would suggest, Emma, is, and thank you for that question. It's okay to use color for emphasis, but you shouldn't use it. You shouldn't only use color for emphasis. So, because also we didn't mention colorblind users, but many people are colorblind, so they may not see the same color that if you're not colorblind that you're using to emphasize. So I would just say, think about other ways that could additionally convey meaning besides color. If you want to use the color, that's okay, but don't let it be the only thing. It might be like putting it in having some kind of a background, area, or yeah, that's all I can think of right now. But
Yeah.
I feel like I would it also might vary in terms of what they were trying to convey.
Mm-hmm. And I saw that Milena asked in the chat about bold, italic, or underline. Like, does a screen reader indicate that something is bold or italic? No.
No,
Okay.
it does not. That's why doing the styles thing that I showed you in Google Docs, which you can also do in Word or other programs, is really important. And you can style those according to what you want them to look like. So, I can change the font size, I can change I could make it bold and whatever, and then make all my heading 2s look like that. You can apply your custom font style to that heading level.
Okay.
So you
Thank
don't have, sure, yeah.
Priscilla, I have just quick question.
Yes,
Uh,
Mandala.
Yeah, about the font changing, I was just trying to fix that PowerPoint that we were working on.
Yeah.
And it seems that the font changing feature is not allowing me to change the font in the sentence. Like I was trying to make it all lowercase, for example. It's not letting me do it using that Google PowerPoint or
I
365.
think I know why that is, Mangala, because that font is all caps. Some fonts don't even have lowercase, like they are just all caps. They're all uppercase. So that font, I would say that font for many reasons is not a good idea. Maybe if you were like just using it for a title and it was a short word or something, but not for a whole bunch of text. So I would suggest in that situation, you would want to change fonts and use something like Arial, as Derek mentioned, or Times New Roman or Verdana or something very simple. Okay, did that make sense?
Thank you.
Welcome.
You.
And Milena, you have a question?
In this question, I just wanted to show, Juan's work on the document.
Ooh.
He did a great job taking out the contrast for sure. I just wanted to share that, before. Great job taking out the contrast and cleaning up those slides. Thank you.
Very user-friendly.
Yes.
And I want to say, Milena, I'm going to take your question in a second. I don't want to say don't use images because I'm actually a big fan of imagery in general. And I think it's really important. So I don't want to discourage you, but I do want to just, help you cultivate the awareness of what images mean for somebody using a screen reader. So you don't have to never use images. That's okay. But nice job, Juan. And Milena, what's your question?
Yeah, my question is about the font families. I heard that, and I use that for my exam. Verdana font family is good for like clarity, but I was wondering if there is anything, because I saw once in the Kindle a font for dyslexic people, but I don't know if that's possible to include it for like in the math or like, for Word files or doc files, or do you have any suggestions for that?
I don't know, and that's something that I would be very interested in knowing. So maybe we should research it. And yeah, I am a big Verdana fan myself. I think it's really user friendly. So yeah, I think
Okay.
Verdana.
I look for the name of the font. It's not easy to find it's not easy to like import fonts into the word processing thing.
Yeah, they make it a little complicated. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Milena. So maybe we should move on. Yeah, thank you, Derek.
Oh, Clarence had a question.
Yes, not question. I just have a comment. Kind of follow what Priscilla said about images and stuff. My feeling, with PowerPoint, because a lot of the reason behind, why we use PowerPoint, especially in teaching or doing presentation, is for the purpose of communicating with the audience live and presenting images and even some of the visual effect. I mean, I think the aesthetic of it is important if it's for the purpose of that presentation for the moment. So a lot of time, what I'm trying to do is to sort of make a duplicate of that same presentation and then just turn it into sort of a note format. Or even, like what we're trying to do here, removing the background, removing all the effect or spacing out the information. Because our student, of course, also love to use our PowerPoint as a study guide. In fact, some of us kind of using the PowerPoint in some way as a notebook or even equivalent to the textbook that student will be reading in study form. So I think having those duplicate version of it, could be another way to kind of, so we don't lose, one way or the other for the sake of also making it accommodating for everyone.
Thank you, Clarence.
Yes, thank you. A good point. I mean, I haven't done like duplicate, but that's a good way, to, I guess, reduce the, the formatting and just to have, an extra copy like that as an option for students to use. Okay, we have a few minutes, 2 minutes.
So the sad truth about PDFs, they are really problematic when it comes to accessibility. I've seen so many PDFs that basically are just like a scan of a printed article or document. And that is the equivalent of giving a student an image of type rather than giving them something that is actual text that a screen reader can read to them. To ensure that a PDF is readable text, readable, I mean, for a screen reader, you would need to scan it and convert it into what's called OCR, which stands for optical character recognition text. And we do have that capacity at the college. We have at least one scanner that can do that, maybe a couple. I know that the library is in possession of one, but if you have like an article that you want to make available for your students, either as a PDF or in any other kind of way, please let Derek or me know so that we can help you figure out how to do that in a way that will make it accessible and available for everyone. There's a lot more to say about PDFs, but we do suggest that if you possibly can avoid using them, we suggest that you go with the more accessible tools, which would be one version of Word or Google Docs at this point.
Yeah, just now that, now that we have these options for Google Docs and Microsoft 365, I think PDF originally was supposed to be something that was accessible in terms of like where anybody could have it, as opposed to like a desktop version of Word, which costs money. But now we have things we can share openly, so try to avoid PDFs. Milena has a question.
I was just typing it on the chat actually that we can export PDFs to Word using the Adobe license that we have from CUNY, and it works pretty well. So sometimes I do that. I just take a PDF and then I export and go back and correct it so I can share it with as a Word file that can be edited.
That's great. Thank you for that, for sharing that, Milena. And yeah, the other thing I wanted to say too is that sometimes I know you'll have like a copy of a well-loved chapter of an article and it's been photocopied again and again and again, and it might just be hard to read because it's got all the kind of detritus of multiple photocopies, and that's also an obstacle for students and readers. So if that's the situation, often there are digital versions available. If you can't find one, I would suggest contacting Derek or someone else in the library and just say, hey, can you help me find a digital version of this? There often are, and he also knows how to make them if you can't find one. Casey, you had a question?
I do. So my question is, So part of what we're doing on the grant work for Project Conexión is we're creating these career resources that are going to go in with a new section of the website that's getting put on. And I should check, but I'm assuming that the website will have a lot of these things in there so that it's accessible. But these PDFs we're creating PDFs meant to be something that we can actually hand students physically is what it was originally intended for when, before the pandemic, we were, in the process of this. Now it's going to be used a little bit differently where we're still having them. But I guess the question is, for things that are kind of to put out from the college, is making it like the OCR scan. Is that something that is happening already, or is that something that each individual, like we should make sure that we would get these scanned so that they would be accessible as like a secondary downloadable item? Because while the intention is still to be something we physically hand students or that advising is using to help students in tandem with the website, I could see an instance where it's like, hey, I'm just going to email this to you because we're still working primarily virtually.
So that's a really good question. And I'm just going to make a plea to everyone. First of all, thank you all for being here and for caring enough to pay attention to these very important issues. I'm really appreciative that all of you are here and taking the time to do this. And this comes up because of Casey's question, which I think indicates that at the college, unfortunately, we do not have a lot of coordination around accessibility. And it's not all up to the Office of Accessibility. It's up to us as an institution. So we can't just say, oh, they're not doing their thing. No, there's a lot more to it. And they're really focused on the student's experience. So that's connected with what we're doing here, but it's not the only thing. So I think there's a great need for that coordination. So I'm just going to plant the seed with everybody to advocate for getting the tools that we need, for example, for captioning, for videos, so that all captions are accurate, so deaf students can understand them and they're getting the content. Things like that. Whenever you see an accessibility need, I just want to encourage you to make noise about it. And also let Wendy Nicholson know, because that's part of, this is a social justice issue. This is an issue of students not being able to equitably access the learning materials that they need to learn. So I think it's really important to bring issues like Casey just raised to the attention of our supervisors and admin. And I really think the college needs to put some resources into better coordination and better tools.
Priscilla, would Wendy Nicholson be the person actually to spearhead this kind of coordination that's needed?
Well, I don't know, Sue, because I would say somewhat, but I think it's probably, we don't have a designated person like that. And I know that accessibility is a big concern of Wendy's, and I know that she has a background as a sign language interpreter. So, and then, she comes from the field of advocating for students with disabilities. So I think it's part of her responsibility, but she's also got a tremendous amount to do in her position of coordinator of DEI. I wish we had a designated coordinator of access. I think that we need that at the college as a workplace, as a learning environment. So yeah, if you have ideas about that,
Yeah.
Let me know. Let's build this movement.
I put a link to the slideshow in the chat in case anybody.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So my I guess my kind of follow up to that, and that's a really, just thank you for that answer, is for the purposes of these PDFs that we are creating that are not, for a class, they're kind of going to be a college-wide thing. Once we have them done, because we're still in the design and editing phase of all of this, would it be to contact the library to contact Derek or Ian to have help with getting them as alternative formats? And then I have a second question. We're having them translated. We're going to have them English and Spanish. Can the OCR do other languages?
I think it might be able to because we have a really good software that does that, but I'm not 100% sure. Casey, maybe you and I should follow up about this. I also, I'm sorry.
I said, yes, let's
Okay,
chat.
and also, I know the web team of the college has done a lot in the area of PDF remediation because CUNY was actually threatened with a lawsuit a few years ago because of having inaccessible websites, including inaccessible information in PDFs that users couldn't access. So the college spent a lot of time and effort a few years ago going through and supposedly making the PDFs accessible. So it's probably worthwhile to talk about like how they did that and if that's something that they could share with the rest of us. So we're not
Yeah.
all on our own, but I
And
see we're over time.
Clarence, yeah, Clarence said, Ed, isn't that one of the recommendations from, from Middle States? And that is true. Something that, we discussed this, Priscilla and I at a different meeting.
Well, Derek and I presented for the chairs recently and we brought up Middle States as how important it is for the college now. That is a recommendation from the standard that that Clarence was involved with. So hopefully that will help us actually put some resources into it. And
Yes.
thank you, Clarence. And
Yeah,
folks, if you have to go, because I know we're over time, we were going to go till 11:30. That's okay. I want to say thank you to everyone who's been here. And if you have to jump off, totally understandable. If anyone wants to stay behind, feel free. We can still answer some questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you
day.
so much.
Bye.
I'm going to
See
stop
you all.
the
Bye.